Jack Solis was not the sort of person who stepped into cosmic legend without protest, yet destiny seemed keen on bending him to its will. He had been piloting the battered Rustbucket along a trade lane near Vega Prime, hoping for a routine stop for rest and repairs. The ship's name was no hyperbole. It was a living, clanking testament to mechanical desperation. Her conduits leaked coolant whenever he pushed the thrusters to their limit. Her life support systems coughed with each acceleration, and her main console flickered like a dying star whenever the autopilot engaged. Jack never intended to be a spacefarer forever. He originally saw courier work as a stepping stone, a quick way to accumulate enough credits to buy a small orchard on Mars or even some quiet dwelling on the comparatively serene Ganymede colonies. Yet the cosmos had found in him a strange magnetism for trouble. He always ended up one quantum leap away from catastrophe, as though some cosmic puppeteer were nudging him into precarious predicaments. That morning, though morning was merely the artificial timescale set by his battered ship's clock, he found himself rattled from a half-sleep by the shriek of the console alarm. Alert! Main thrusters compromised. Neutrino leak imminent. The word scrolled ominously across the cracked display, and Jack felt his pulse hammer in his ears. Great, he muttered. Another day in paradise. With trembling hands, he stabilized the ship's trajectory, fighting the swirl of ominous smoke drifting around the cockpit. The emergency oxygen mask pressed hot against his face, and his breath echoed in its plastic chamber. As soon as the thrusters sputtered, the backup drive kicked in, but at a fraction of normal capacity. Vega Prime Station shimmered in the void, a massive hub known across the sector for its bustling commerce and diverse inhabitants. Towering spires of steel and luminescent windows glowed in cosmic twilight. Jack guided the Rustbucket with the grace of a wounded bird. Sparks burst from the engineering bay as he switched power from life support to the backup thrusters, forcing the engine to burn hotter. He was grateful to see that the docking control, while evidently annoyed, granted him permission. The hiss and clang of the docking clamps sounded like a lullaby, promising safety, at least for the moment. Jack let out a weary sigh, removing the oxygen mask and wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a sooty glove. He might have kissed the deck plating if he weren't so drained. The cargo hold beeped its own protest, indicating that a few precious boxes had come loose during the turbulence. At least it wasn't anything explosive. Swallowing down his anxiety, he stumbled to the main hatch, each step punctuated by the hiss of hydraulics. Outside, the walkway was lit in a dull red, an emergency strip welcoming him to one of the less savory docking wings of Vega Prime. The corridors smelled faintly of overheated metal and exotic spices. The moment he stepped out, he was greeted by the bored expression of a dock officer, a tall humanoid with wiry antennae, wearing a grime-stained coverall. Name, vessel, business? The officer asked in a monotone. Jack Solis, Jack said between labored breaths. Ship's the Rustbucket, and business is living to see another day. The officer snorted, stamping the digital docket. You get 5 days in the slip. After that, we chuck your vessel out the airlock. Fees 800 credits. Jack nearly choked. 800 was more than he usually made in a month of courier runs. But he kept his calm, he had no choice. He mustered a resigned nod and transferred the docking fee from his meager funds. Though physically exhausted, Jack was somewhat relieved to have survived another near catastrophe. He turned to the corridors leading into the station proper, determined to find a mechanic who could coax the Rustbucket back to life. With a mixture of dread and optimism swirling in his mind, he marched onward, footsteps echoing on the metallic floor. Little did he know that his biggest challenge was not the station's unscrupulous repair rates, nor the labyrinthine halls of Vega Prime, but something far more unexpected: an alien elder, a bag of suspicious cargo, and the age-old traditions of a warrior clan known as the Nexari. Had he known, he might have stayed in the cockpit, or perhaps jettisoned himself into the nearest life pod. But fate had plans that neither Jack nor the cosmos could guess, and they began to unfold the moment he turned the next corner. The main concourse of Vega Prime was a realm of perpetual motion. Traders and travelers from half the galaxy strode, slithered, or hovered through the corridors. Stalls sold curios from 1,000 worlds. Hawkers shouted in tongues that Jack couldn't even begin to place, and hollow displays bombarded him with advertisements for everything from cosmic cruises to radiation-proof undergarments. Jack threaded through the throng, weary but resolute, determined to find a mechanic. Halfway between a kiosk selling luminescent fruit and a bar reeking of sour ale, he spotted a sign for Mardigan's Machine Emporium. The gaudy neon sign flickered, illustrating a grinning android face. It didn't look promising, but it was a start. He paused, checking the meager credit balance on his handheld device. The docking fee had left him nearly broke, but he needed the ship repaired more than he needed a roof over his head. Suddenly, a panicked cry echoed behind him. Instinct led Jack to spin around, heart pounding. In the midst of the crowd was an elderly alien woman, easily half a foot shorter than Jack, with a wispy crest of feathers crowning her head. She wore elaborate robes lined with silver thread, and her skin was a deep turquoise that shimmered under the station's artificial lights. She was hunched over, struggling to hoist a large, intricately carved case. At first glance, it appeared she was simply out shopping. But then, a group of rowdy station toughs barreled past her, nearly knocking her off her feet. Her feathered crest trembled with alarm as she lost her grip on the case, which slipped from her arms and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Jack, propelled by an impulse he would later call misguided heroism, rushed forward. "Careful, ma'am," he said, stooping to retrieve the heavy case. He managed to catch it before it tipped over further. He noticed swirling insignias etched along its sides, marking it as something valuable or at least of cultural significance. The alien woman peered up at him, her eyes wide and watery. She spoke in a language he did not recognize, but her voice trembled in a way that transcended linguistic barriers, conveying gratitude mixed with distress. With a polite smile, Jack offered the case back to her. "Here you are, safe and sound. You all right?" She continued speaking in that unknown tongue, and he shrugged apologetically. "I'm sorry, I don't quite, Suddenly, a mechanical voice crackled overhead. A station translator drone, floating on repulsor jets, approached and emitted a polite chime. "The honored elder thanks you for your assistance," the drone announced. "She inquires if you will carry her burden a short distance." Jack blinked, glancing around. He could almost feel the curious stares of passers-by. Was he about to get fleeced? Some station denizens ran small scams, luring gullible visitors into carrying contraband. But something about the old woman's trembling posture, the sincerity in her large, expressive eyes, made him reconsider. He offered a tentative nod. "Sure, I'll help, so long as it's not too far." The translator drone repeated his response in the elder's language. She beamed, revealing pointed, serrated teeth that looked somewhat alarming yet simultaneously genial. She spoke a few more words, and the drone caught up. "She offers blessing and thanks," the drone recited. "She says that her name is Elder Zarek, matriarch of a family among the Nexari. She requires your strong arms to carry her case to a private lounge on the upper deck." "Nexari, huh?" Jack said under his breath. He had encountered a few in his travels, renowned for their warrior culture and unwavering sense of honor. They were formidable in battle and known for strict adherence to tradition. The translator drone's mention of matriarch piqued his curiosity. Still, Jack was not one to deny an elder, especially when she seemed so frail. So he secured a better grip on the case, nodding politely for the woman to lead the way. She hobbled along with cautious steps, tapping a staff decorated with feathers that matched her own plumage. Her posture was bent with age, but there was a regal air about her stance, as though she had once been a proud warrior herself. The journey took them through the station's lifts and corridors, the crowds thinning as they ascended toward a more exclusive level. Hollow sconces along the walls cast shimmering patterns that evoked abstract cosmic vistas, and plush carpeting replaced the bare metal flooring of the lower decks. Jack's arms began to ache from the weight of the case, and he allowed himself a momentary lament for his luck. At last, they reached a large hatchway guarded by two Nexari sentinels, tall, imposing figures clad in scaled armor. Their gleaming eyes narrowed at Jack's approach, but they stepped aside upon seeing the elder. The hatch slid open, revealing a sumptuous lounge filled with Nexari clan members. Some reclined on low couches, while others conversed around a central table. Elder Zarek gestured for Jack to place the case upon the table's surface. He did so, exhaling a sigh of relief as the weight left his arms. The elder's gaze fell upon him, and she spoke in a solemn tone. The drone drifted forward to translate. "She asks your name," the drone said. With a polite bow, Jack replied, "I am Jack Solis." The elder repeated his name, her voice reverent. Then she tapped the top of the case and ran a clawed hand gently over a carved symbol. She spoke again, though her tone was low, almost a chant. The translator drone explained. "She says that by carrying her burden, you have demonstrated honorable conduct. According to Nexari custom, one who aids the matriarch in her time of need, by bearing her cargo across a threshold, is bound by certain traditions. She thanks you and extends formal recognition." Jack relaxed a fraction. That's very kind. He was beginning to feel a tad self-conscious as the entire lounge of Nexari turned to study him. Their expressions ranged from cautious curiosity to something akin to approval. The elder continued her speech, and her clanmates nodded, some with faint smiles. Then the translator drone emitted a beep. She states that, by ancient law, your act implies a willingness to be considered for a formal alliance. You are to remain here until the next steps are clarified. A chill coursed through Jack. Alliance? What? But before he could finish, the elder gave him a soft pat on the shoulder, her eyes shining with gratitude, and then she moved away, leaving him alone in a ring of silent, watchful Nexari. An uneasy sensation twisted in Jack's stomach. He couldn't guess the nature of this alliance, but something about the crowd's reactions told him it wasn't a mere polite gesture. They were looking at him like a piece of cosmic puzzle that had just fallen into their laps, something they'd never expected, yet could not ignore. Jack cleared his throat, wishing fervently he had stayed in the Rustbucket. Perhaps an exploding engine would have been less dangerous than the gaze of these alien warriors, who seemed to regard him with an odd mixture of solemn acceptance and feigned amusement. And so, unbeknownst to him, the first step of a peculiar fate had been taken. Time stretched endlessly in that opulent lounge. For nearly an hour, Jack stood awkwardly, eyes shifting between Nexari warriors who inspected him from the corners of their gaze. Elder Zarek had vanished into a back room, leaving him in a limbo of uncertainty. He tried to stifle the urge to fidget or clear his throat, aware that any sudden movement might be misinterpreted. At last, the matriarch returned, supported by her staff. Behind her strode a younger Nexari woman, tall and imposing in form, her posture radiating confidence and strength. She wore a breastplate of dark, polished chitin, and a curved blade was strapped at her side. Her hair, if that feather-like crest could be called hair, was a striking golden hue, adorned with a few small braids that sported ceremonial beads. Her expression was fierce, regal, and distinctly unimpressed. Jack felt the intensity of her gaze pierce him. He swallowed. This was clearly a warrior of high standing. The hush among the clan members told him she was someone important, someone to be revered or feared. Elder Zarek began to speak in low, resonant tones, gesturing occasionally to Jack and then to the young woman. The translator drone circled overhead. The matriarch says, the drone began, that this is her granddaughter, Captain Nyra Zarek, an esteemed warrior among the Nexari. She also states that your act of carrying the elder's sacred cargo has invoked an ancient tradition. Jack tried to mask his confusion with a polite smile. Which is? A murmur spread through the Nexari crowd. Captain Nyra's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening with apparent disapproval. The drone continued. The tradition is commonly known among the Nexari as the right of willed union. By bearing the matriarch's burden across the threshold of the clan's domain, you have inadvertently signaled your willingness to share in the clan's future. In effect, you have offered yourself for betrothal to the matriarch's direct descendant. Silence fell. Jack stared, disbelieving. His heart hammered in his chest, and for a moment, he wondered if he had misunderstood. Betrothal? He managed to squeak. A series of hisses and clicks passed among the Nexari. Elder Zarek nodded gravely, then placed a withered hand on Jack's arm as though in gentle reassurance. Wait, he said, voice unsteady. This is all some big misunderstanding, right? I was just being polite. I didn't realize that. Captain Nyra spoke then, her voice low and resonant. Though Jack couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear. This was an annoyance of epic proportions. Her eyes locked on Jack with a fierce glare, and she let loose a short, clipped statement. The drone translated. She says she does not wish to be bound to a human, especially not one who comes bearing no credentials of worthiness. However, the matriarch's directive is law, and the clan must honor the tradition unless you, Jack Solis, can be declared unfit according to Nexari custom. Jack grimaced. The last thing he wanted was to marry someone against her will or his. Yet he could see the communal weight of tradition in the eyes of everyone present. They would not simply let him walk away. Nexari custom bound them as surely as it now ensnared him. He turned to Nyra and bowed slightly, feeling more than a little ridiculous. I'm sorry. I didn't know about your culture's tradition. I never meant any offense. Is there a way to undo this gracefully? The drone whirred, capturing his words, then relayed them in the Nexari language. Nyra's expression hardened further. She snapped a reply. She says, the drone offered, that there is a means of dissolving the prospective engagement. One must fail 3 Nexari trials of worthiness, or else succeed, and thus remain betrothed. But if you deliberately fail, you invite deep dishonor upon the clan, which could provoke severe consequences. Jack felt his breath catch. Are you saying, if I fail on purpose, it's an insult to the clan? A clang echoed in the lounge as Nyra set her hand on the hilt of her curved blade. The elder woman stepped between them, her posture wise and steady, offering what seemed to be conciliatory gestures. She spoke gently, and the drone translated. The matriarch does not wish to force this union against your will. She only invoked tradition because she recognizes courage in your willingness to assist her. She believes your soul might be of honorable stock. Should you wish to withdraw, you may attempt the trials and see if you have the spirit of a Nexari. If you do not, fate shall guide you away from us. If you do, then the bonding is meant to be, whether you expected it or not. Jack rubbed his temples. This was madness, an otherworldly conundrum straight out of some old holonovel. He had no idea what the Nexari trials entailed, but the thought of intentionally flunking them it felt rude, to say the least, given how gracious Elder Zarek had been. And yet, if he passed by some miracle, he'd be obligated to marry Captain Nyra, who looked like she'd sooner throttle him than exchange vows. He took a long, steadying breath. All right, he said softly, I guess. I'll face these trials. But after that, we part ways, right? The translator repeated his words, and the elder gave a solemn nod. Captain Nyra folded her arms across her chest, disapproval etched in every line of her face. Jack wondered if he'd live to see tomorrow. The elder then offered a final statement, and the drone spoke in hushed tones. She suggests you rest, for the first trial begins at sunrise station time. You shall remain their guest tonight, and no harm shall befall you. May your spirit find clarity. At that, the clan members dispersed, returning to their conversations, though many threw lingering glances in Jack's direction. He was ushered to a small guest chamber adjacent to the lounge, a room with minimal furnishings and a single sleeping cot that hummed gently to provide warmth. Once the door slid shut, he let out a long breath, collapsing onto the cot. His mind reeled, flipping through every possible scenario. If these trials were as dangerous as he suspected, there was a chance he wouldn't emerge in one piece. Nexari were known to be proud warriors. They didn't shy away from lethal challenges. Staring at the metal ceiling, Jack contemplated ways to flee. Could he slip out during the night, find his way back to the docks, and escape? But something told him that vanishing without a trace would anger the Nexari more than an intentional failure. And besides, his ship was in no condition to outrun any pursuit. He cursed his rotten luck. All he had wanted was to land safely, pay for repairs, and go on his merry way. Instead, he was now a prospective fiancé to a Nexari warrior whose scowl alone could halt his heart. Eventually, exhaustion overcame his jumbled thoughts. He drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by half-formed dreams of cosmic battles and the sound of ceremonial drums echoing through starry voids. And though he didn't yet realize it, fate had just set him on a collision course with something far greater than a mere cultural misunderstanding. Something that would thrust him into the heart of cosmic conflicts, stolen artifacts, and the forging of a bond that might outlast the brightest stars. Jack awoke to a sharp rap on the chamber door. He sat up, bleary-eyed, his body protesting the meager rest. The door slid open to reveal a stern-faced Nexari attendant. Without a word, the attendant gestured for Jack to follow. He made his way through winding corridors lined with tapestries depicting Nexari heroes in battle, each portrait capturing the fierce grace for which the species was famed. Eventually, he emerged into a vast, empty cargo bay illuminated by overhead lights that glowed with an almost ceremonial haze. Captain Nyra waited in the center of the bay. She stood with her arms crossed, and a handful of Nexari warriors formed a semicircle behind her. In the corner stood Elder Zarek, posture regal even in her advanced years. Nyra addressed Jack in Nexari, and the drone repeated, "This shall be your first trial, the trial of endurance." You must prove your physical resilience by surviving the gauntlet of the twin swords. Jack stared, uncomprehending, until two Nexari approached him, each handing him a short baton. The drone chimed in again. These batons will block the strikes from the mechanical arms you see arrayed before you. Sure enough, several robotic limbs, each ending in a dull metal blade, stretched along the cargo bay walls. They appeared dormant now, but Jack had a queasy feeling that once activated, they would whirl in a terrifying dance of slashes. Nyra's lips curled into a humorless smile. She spoke again, the drone translating. We do not wish your death, only to test your stamina. The blades are blunt, but if you fail to parry them, you will emerge bruised and battered. If you flee, you forfeit the trial. Stand, fight, and endure until the automated system ceases. Jack tried not to groan. He was no warrior. He'd had a few scraps in dingy station bars, but parrying a swarm of swinging blades that never tired? This was madness. Still, he had no choice. Summoning what little courage he possessed, he nodded. All right, I'll do it. The Nexari stepped back, forming a wide circle. The lights dimmed. With a clang, the mechanical arms activated, rotating on a central pivot. The first blade whipped toward him with startling speed. Jack barely raised his batons in time. The blunt metal edge slammed against his defenses, sending a jolt through his arms. Another blade slashed in from the left, forcing him to pivot and block again, the impact numbing his wrists. He grit his teeth, sweat already beading on his forehead. The arms moved faster than he would have believed. The system was designed to overwhelm. Each pivot of the mechanical array launched a fresh flurry of strikes from unpredictable angles, diagonals, overhead slashes, sweeps aimed at his legs. Desperation fueled Jack's movements. He had no strategy other than pure survival. More than once, he felt the bite of metal colliding with his ribs or shoulders as he failed to block in time. Yet, something within him stirred, a hint of adrenaline-laced instinct. He clenched the batons and tried to mimic the defensive moves he had witnessed in half-remembered holofilms. Gradually, he found a rhythm. Block high, pivot, block low, sidestep. The blade still caught him often, bruising arms and thighs, but he managed to remain upright, each breath ragged and harsh. The Nexari watchers were silent, except for the occasional grunt of approval or dismay. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Jack's arms began to tremble from exertion, and pain flared where bruises overlapped. His vision blurred with sweat, and each time a blade hammered against his batons, his entire body threatened to buckle. But he pressed on, driven by stubborn resolve. He told himself that if he could survive half-broken thrusters and cosmic pirates, he could endure this, too. The mechanical arms whirled in a final torrent of strikes, almost as though reading his growing fatigue. Jack had to spin, duck, and lunge, each movement more desperate than the last. Then, all at once, the arms slowed, retracting toward the wall with a metallic whine. A clang echoed, signaling the system's shutdown. Jack collapsed to one knee, panting, the baton slipping from his sweaty grip. The silence in the cargo bay was deafening. At the perimeter, the Nexari stared at him, some with surprise, some with grudging admiration. Nyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the bruises and cuts on Jack's arms and torso. Her jaw tightened, as though this outcome conflicted with her expectations. She spoke tersely, and the drone translated. You have endured the first trial. I commend your spirit, though your skill is unrefined. Rest now. You shall need your strength for what follows. Jack forced a wry smile, his lips trembling from exhaustion. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Elder Zarek approached, her wise eyes filled with quiet approval. She placed a small bottle of salve in his hand, then gestured for a pair of attendants to help him to his feet and lead him to the med bay. By the time Jack was lowered onto a cushioned seat in the modest infirmary, he was beyond exhaustion. A Nexari medic smeared a cool, sweet-smelling paste across his bruises. Jack winced but felt immediate relief as the analgesic properties kicked in. His mind spun with confusion. A part of him was furious at having been thrust into this predicament. Another part recognized something else, a growing respect for these proud warriors and their fierce sense of honor. His gaze drifted to the memory of Captain Nyra's rigid stance, the line of her jaw, the barely contained fury in her eyes. She clearly despised his presence and everything it represented. She was bound by tradition to remain open to this betrothal, yet from her perspective, he was an unworthy stranger. He couldn't blame her. If their roles were reversed, he'd resent it, too. But how to extricate himself from this tangle without dishonoring Elder Zarek or humiliating Nyra? As he slipped into a restless doze, lulled by the medicinal salve, his last conscious thought was a silent plea for the next trial to be easier. But deep down, he knew better. The path ahead promised nothing but mounting challenges. And that was before he would learn of the stolen artifact that might change the course of the entire sector. 2 days later, Jack found himself in a quiet antechamber on the upper decks of Vega Prime Station, his body still aching from the constant bruises he'd acquired. The second trial lay just behind him, an ordeal called the Test of Shadows, which involved an elaborate stealth mission through a simulation of Nexari clan territory. He'd succeeded, somehow, by harnessing every bit of cunning gleaned from his years evading starport customs and less-than-legal debt collectors. It was just enough to prove he was not entirely hopeless. But Captain Nyra's scowl hadn't softened in the slightest. If anything, the fact that he had persevered through 2 trials only seemed to deepen her frustration. Now, as he awaited the third and final challenge, a sense of foreboding weighed on him like an iron cloak. He sat on a bench, trying to quell the fluttering in his stomach, when Elder Zarek appeared. Her presence was calm, a soothing balm in an otherwise tense environment. She sat beside him, leaning on her staff. She murmured a few words in Nexari, her tone gentle. The translator drone hovered close, quickly rendering her speech into standard. "My grandson, you have shown bravery and resourcefulness. The third trial will test your heart. But before that time comes, I sense your path may cross with another destiny. There is something I must tell you." Jack's brow furrowed. "I'm listening." Elder Zarek gestured toward the corridor, indicating for him to follow her to a quieter corner. Once they were alone, she opened a small, ornately carved chest she carried at her side, revealing a shimmering crystal fragment. It pulsated with a faint inner glow, like a captured star. "This," the drone relayed, "is a shard of the Heart of Zenith, an ancient Nexari relic with the power to unify or destroy. It is the last remnant the clan possesses. The rest was stolen generations ago by a rival clan, the Drakiri." Jack leaned in, hypnotized by the crystal's radiance. "What does it do?" Zarek's eyes narrowed. She chose her words carefully, her voice low and urgent. The drone resumed. "The Heart of Zenith resonates with spiritual energy. In Nexari legend, it can channel willpower into tangible force, bridging the gap between thought and reality. In the wrong hands, it becomes a terrible weapon." A trickle of cold sweat formed on Jack's brow. "You're saying that this rival clan has the rest of the relic? Why haven't you tried to reclaim it?" The elder offered a rueful sigh. "We have tried for decades. But each time, the Drakiri vanished deeper into the lawless fringes of the galaxy. Rumor now suggests that a faction of them has surfaced here on Vega Prime to broker the Heart of Zenith to an even darker force, perhaps a group of Star Raiders or a covert Empire faction." Jack's mind reeled. He'd been a courier for numerous shady deals, but an artifact of cosmic power took the game to a whole new level. "So you think it's here, on Vega Prime?" Zarek nodded. "Yes, and my granddaughter, Captain Nyra, stands at the forefront of our quest to recover it. This is more than clan pride. It concerns all who roam the stars." Jack could only imagine how important this artifact was to Nyra. Perhaps it explained why she seemed so tightly wound. Her entire clan's honor hinged on preventing the Heart of Zenith from falling into malevolent hands. With a soft click, the elder closed the chest, concealing the crystal fragment. She looked Jack in the eyes, her own gaze reflecting both sorrow and hope. "You are wrapped in our fates now. I trust you will not abandon us, for your destiny is intertwined with this cause, however unexpected it may be." He wanted to protest that he'd never asked for any of this. Yet the earnest gleam in Elder Zarek's eyes, coupled with a strange stirring in his own chest, stilled his words. Some sense of moral obligation settled upon him. Maybe it was naive, but he couldn't turn his back on them. Just then, the corridor lights flickered, indicating a station-wide announcement. Over the loudspeakers came a crackling voice, warning of an unauthorized vessel that had forcibly broken from a secure docking bay. The voice urged travelers to remain vigilant. Elder Zarek rose. The final trial approaches soon, she said quietly. But there are more pressing matters. I must ask you, will you aid Nyra in investigating this threat? It may be tied to the stolen artifact. Jack rubbed a sore spot on his arm, flaring up from the trials. I'll help, he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. But I'm no Nexari warrior. I'm just trying to get my ship fixed, remember? Zarek offered a thin smile. Sometimes, the cosmos places us exactly where we're needed. Before Jack could respond, Captain Nyra's voice echoed down the corridor. She strode toward them, face set in grim determination. The translator drone repeated her terse request. Come with me. We have a lead on a Drakiri contact. You will assist in the interrogation. Jack's eyes widened. Me? Why me? Nyra shot him a glare that needed no translation. She barked a few more words, and the drone explained. Because a human presence might put the contact off guard. We suspect the contact deals with multiple species. Let us see what the Drakiri do when faced with a clan outsider. Elder Zarek placed a reassuring hand on Jack's shoulder. Then, with a swirl of her robes, she headed back toward the lounge. Nyra jerked her head, indicating Jack should follow. As they marched, Jack realized with a sinking feeling that this mission was not just a side errand. It was a direct confrontation with those who might hold the Heart of Zenith. If things went sideways, the consequences would be dire, and not just for him. Yet a flicker of resolve ignited in his chest. Perhaps if he helped retrieve the relic, he could prove his worth. It might even help him avoid a forced marriage to an irate warrior. Then again, the more he got involved, the more tangled his destiny became. That tension followed him like a shadow as he hurried after Nyra, weaving through the labyrinthine corridors of Vega Prime. Deep down, he could feel the cosmic gears shifting, drawing him inexorably into a struggle that could reshape alliances and destinies across the stars. The Drakiri contact they sought was a lanky alien named Vel Rosh, known for shady dealings in relics and black market technologies. He had set up a covert meeting in a dingy bar on one of Vega Prime's lower decks, a place known for brawls, contraband, and short tempers. Nyra led the way, her armor blending with the gloom. Jack followed at a nervous distance, scanning the crowded room. The bar's dim lighting cast elongated shadows of patrons hunched over metallic tables, whispering conspiratorially. The music was a droning hum punctuated by electronic beeps. Vel Rosh lounged in a corner booth, flanked by two bodyguards in battered combat vests. The Drakiri possessed features similar to the Nexari, feather-like crests and sharp eyes, but their scales were darker, and their manner exuded a predatory tension. Nyra wasted no time. She marched straight to the table and rapped her knuckles sharply on the surface. Jack lingered behind, trying to project calm confidence he did not feel. Vel Rosh looked up, a grin twisting across his face, revealing serrated teeth. Nyra Zarek, he purred, speaking in surprisingly fluent standard. To what do I owe the pleasure? Nyra's glare could have melted steel. She responded in the Nexari tongue, but Vel Rosh waved a lazy hand. No need for that. Let us converse in a language your pet human can understand. Jack bristled at the insult, but remained silent, aware that any rash remark might derail the delicate interrogation. Nyra spoke slowly, her voice filled with menace. We know you have been in contact with Drakiri raiders who possess a fragment of the Heart of Zenith. Tell us where they are hiding. Vel Rosh tilted his head, as though considering. Such accusations. Why would I bother with a cursed artifact, especially one that the Nexari covet so dearly? Jack sensed Nyra's temper flare. He quickly interjected. Look, we're not here to start a brawl. We just want information. The Heart of Zenith is dangerous in the wrong hands. That's something even a Drakiri should understand. The Drakiri's gaze shifted to Jack, eyes brimming with curiosity. You let the human speak for you, Captain Zarek? Nyra's shoulders tensed, but she allowed Jack to continue. He pressed on, summoning a confidence he didn't truly possess. You can profit if you help us. We're willing to pay for solid intel, or look the other way on some of your less savory dealings. But if you withhold information, you'll have an entire Nexari clan on your tail. Vel Rosh burst into a low, mocking chuckle. You assume I fear the Nexari. Perhaps I do. But fear alone is a poor motivator, yes? He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Still, rumor does place a Drakiri warlord in the depths of Vega Prime's Undercity. Goes by the name of Sketh Virak. He has been bragging that he possesses a relic that can shift the balance of power in the sector. But who knows? He is known for boasting. Nyra's eyes narrowed. Where in the Undercity? Velrosh twiddled his claws, feigning deep thought. I might recall a location for a price. Jack felt Nyra's frustration building. He could practically sense the tension radiating off her. To forestall an explosion, he reached into his coat and produced a small credit chip, one of the last he had. Is this enough to jog your memory? Velrosh snatched the chip with lightning speed, popping it into a scanner attached to his wrist. The device beeped, revealing the meager sum Jack had left. The Drakiri sneered. A pittance. But fine, I will grace you with a breadcrumb. Sketh Virak has been frequenting a gambling den known as the Celestial Drift, accessible only via a coded elevator in Section 12G. Before Jack could respond, Nyra lunged forward and seized Velrosh by the collar, teeth bared. Her voice dripped with venom. If you've lied to us, we will find you. Velrosh's bodyguards tensed, hands drifting toward their weapons. The bar's patrons turned to watch, anticipating a fight. Jack's heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline surging. But Velrosh merely grinned. I wouldn't dare deceive you, Captain. Especially not when there is so much more to be gained from cooperation. Nyra released him and stepped back, nostrils flaring. She and Jack turned to leave, the thick tension in the bar trailing in their wake. As they stepped into the corridor, the doors sealing behind them, Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That could have gone worse, he muttered. Nyra glared, though not specifically at him. She spoke and clipped Nexari, and the translator drone rendered her words. Do not delude yourself. Dealing with Drakiri scum always carries a price. We must go to the Celestial Drift and find Sketh Virak before the artifact is sold or hidden away. Jack nodded, steeling himself. Right. Let's go then. For a moment, the intensity in Nyra's eyes faded, replaced by something akin to grudging respect. She gave a short nod, as though acknowledging his willingness to stand by her side. Then she turned on her heel, leading him deeper into the labyrinth of Vega Prime. As they wound through twisting corridors, Jack's mind churned. Recovering the Heart of Zenith wouldn't just be about performing a good deed. It might be his best shot at dissolving the betrothal under conditions that spared everyone's honor. If he helped Nyra secure this priceless artifact, perhaps she would petition Elder Zarek to release him. Little did he know that this was not just a simple infiltration mission. The Celestial Drift was a den of illusions, bets, and danger, with patrons ranging from minor criminals to lethal Star-Lords. And there, amid the swirl of questionable alliances and cunning deception, Jack would face a confrontation that would challenge not just his fragile partnership with Nyra, but the entire precarious balance of power in the galaxy. Section 12G lay in the bowels of Vega Prime Station, an undercity environment that felt worlds away from the polished corridors above. Damp pipes rattled overhead, flickering neon signs advertised illicit pleasures, and a faint haze of questionable origin drifted through the narrow walkways. Jack followed Nyra, weaving through a crowd that consisted of every shape and species imaginable. Many eyed the Nexari warrior with caution, recognizing the lethal aura that clung to her every step. At last, they reached a battered elevator door with a faint inscription reading, Celestial Drift. A keypad glowed ominously at chest level. Nyra tapped the code Velrosh had provided, each beep echoing in the corridor's silence. For a moment, Jack held his breath, half expecting the code to fail. But the ancient door shuddered open, unveiling an elevator car lined with purple lighting that pulsed rhythmically, like a living creature's heartbeat. They stepped inside, and the doors slid shut behind them with a final clang. As the elevator descended, a subdued hum of electronic music filled the cramped space. Jack tried to muster a veneer of calm, though adrenaline coursed through him. Beside him, Nyra stood rigid, her gaze fixed forward. Ever been to a place like this before? He ventured, voice tense. She responded in Nexari, the drone translating mechanically. No. We conduct ourselves in war councils, not gambling dens. Jack swallowed. Let's just say gambling dens can be as dangerous as war councils, if not more so. The elevator slowed, the music crescendoing. Then the doors slid open, revealing a swirling spectacle of light and sound. The Celestial Drift was a colossal chamber, carved into multiple levels with transparent walkways arching overhead. Hollow displays shimmered with cosmic patterns, while tables of various gambling games buzzed with players. Alien croupiers managed card decks or dice made from luminous crystals. A canopy of smoke and laser beams lent the place an otherworldly charm, equal parts mesmerizing and sinister. Patrons of every species sipped exotic drinks, leaning over rails to watch others lose fortunes in the blink of an eye. Nyra stepped forward, scanning the throng. Jack followed, instinctively keeping a hand near his concealed sidearm. They needed to find SciFi, a Drakiri warlord rumored to hold a piece of the Heart of Zenith. Their initial sweep of the main floor yielded no obvious Drakiri presence. Nyra asked a few well-placed questions to the staff, receiving only shrugs or vague replies. Jack sensed trouble brewing. A warlord like Sketh wouldn't linger in plain sight. He would hold court in a private lounge or VIP section. Eventually, they located a roped-off balcony accessible by invitation only. A hulking bouncer with metallic implants stood guard at the entrance, scanning newcomers with a cold glare. Nyra approached with fearless conviction, but the bouncer merely grunted, "Invite only." Jack sighed inwardly. Diplomacy time. Stepping up, he forced a charming smile. "We're here to see SciFi. A friend of ours said he'd be expecting us." The bouncer stared, unimpressed. "Sketh is not seeing anyone." "Beat it." Nyra's hands clenched at her sides. Jack quickly intervened, producing the credit chip again, now even more meager than before. "Perhaps we can work something out?" The bouncer eyed the chip with mild interest, then scoffed. "Pathetic. I wipe my nose with that much. Unless you've got something more compelling, you're out of luck." Jack glanced at Nyra. She looked ready to throttle the guy, which probably wouldn't end well. Then he recalled Elder Zarek's words about cunning and adaptability. He rifled through his coat pockets, searching for anything of value. He found an odd token he'd picked up on a past courier run, a swirling disc carved from some rare mineral. He didn't know exactly what it was worth, but it occasionally dazzled prospective business associates. Taking a leap of faith, he offered the disc. The bouncer lifted it to the shifting neon lights, eyes widening at the strange, prismatic reflections it cast. "This might do," he muttered. With a grunt, the bouncer stood aside, unclipping the velvet rope. Jack and Nyra slipped past, exchanging tense glances. They ascended a spiral staircase that led to a plush, elevated lounge overlooking the main gambling floor. Up here, the atmosphere was calmer, though no less tense. Wealthy patrons lounged on velvet seats, sipping beverages that sparkled like liquid stardust. In a far corner, surrounded by Drakiri guards, sat a tall figure with obsidian-black feathers, a Drakiri dressed in elegant but functional attire, complete with a curved blade at his hip. SciFi. He glanced in their direction, his eyes narrowing. He seemed neither surprised nor welcoming, just quietly appraising. One of the guards leaned in to whisper something, no doubt identifying Jack and Nyra as uninvited intruders. Sketh lifted a clawed hand, beckoning them closer. Nyra tensed, but complied. Jack followed, every nerve on edge. In a low, resonant voice, Sketh greeted them, Captain Nyra Zarek of the Nexari, accompanied by a human. How intriguing. Nyra wasted no time. "You possess something that belongs to our clan. We want it returned." Sketh smirked. "You refer to the Heart of Zenith, I assume. A powerful relic, indeed. But why would I part with such a treasure?" Jack could see the muscles in Nyra's jaw clench. He decided to jump in before violence erupted. "Look, you and I both know that relic draws the wrong kind of attention. The sort of attention that leads to entire star systems mobilizing to track you down. Maybe you're better off making a deal." Sketh's gaze slid over to Jack with casual interest. "And you are?" "Jack Solis, freelance courier," he said, infusing as much confidence as he could muster. "I've seen how these deals go down. That artifact will bring you nothing but trouble. We can offer you something else in exchange: money, resources." Sketh chuckled. "Money I have plenty of. Resources, likewise. What I lack is amusement. And the Heart of Zenith provides ample entertainment. You see, I've been approached by many parties eager to buy it. Some lay fortunes, others threaten violence. It's quite exhilarating." Nyra hissed, a distinctly Nexari sound that signaled her growing impatience. She shifted, one hand drifting toward her blade. Sketh tooted. "Ah, Captain, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is a civilized establishment. Besides, you wouldn't risk harming these fine patrons, would you?" Jack hurriedly placed a hand on Nyra's arm, holding her back. "What do you want from us, Sketh?" A purr rumbled deep in the warlord's throat. "Let us make it interesting. The Celestial Drift is known for its high-stakes tables, and I haven't had a worthy challenge in ages. If you wish to walk away with the Heart of Zenith, why not try your luck in a game of cosmic poker? If you win, I will relinquish the relic's location. If you lose, Well? He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the perfumed air. Nyra scoffed. This is absurd. You want to gamble with the fate of an entire clan? Sketh spread his hands theatrically. The game is simple. Unless you prefer, I simply sell the artifact to the highest bidder, who may or may not be your mortal enemy. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the lounge was palpable, the other patrons feigning disinterest, yet clearly eavesdropping. Nyra's eyes flicked to Jack, her expression full of conflicting emotions, rage, desperation, and a reluctant plea. Jack swallowed hard. He was no stranger to cards, having spent countless nights in seedy station corners waiting for cargo or shady clients. But he had never gambled for stakes quite like this. All right, Jack said quietly. We'll play. Sketh's grin spread like a predatory ripple. Wonderful. Let the game begin. Jack felt a heavy knot form in his gut. He glanced at Nyra, whose clenched jaw and taut posture betrayed how much she despised this. But neither of them saw another option. And so, with cosmic forces swirling around them, they took seats at a specially arranged table, glaring neon lights flickering over the polished surface. A hush fell over the lounge. For Jack Solis, it was about to become the most important hand of cards he would ever play, the difference between reclaiming a priceless relic or losing everything, including whatever fragile trust he had built with the Nexari warrior by his side. The deck used in cosmic poker at the Celestial Drift was unlike any Jack had seen. Each card flickered with holographic suits, stars for clubs, comets for diamonds, galaxies for hearts, and nebulas for spades. The croupier, a slender cyborg with mechanical eyes, dealt the cards with the fluid precision of a program savant. Sketh lounged across from Jack, his inky black feathers catching the table's neon glow. Nyra stood behind Jack, her arms crossed in a show of silent support, or perhaps a silent threat, should he fail. Jack swallowed. He played standard poker variants across the galaxy, but the Celestial Drift had its own rules. Each player started with an equal pile of golden chips, denominated in cosmic values. The objective was to win each round by forming the highest combination of suits and ranks, complicated by shifting wild cards that changed with every orbit of the central dealer chip. Tension coiled around the table as the first hand began. Jack's heart pounded, though he forced himself to maintain a calm exterior. He had one advantage: Sketh might be overconfident, believing a simple human couldn't match his cunning. Cards slid across the table. Jack peeked at his hand, a scattering of suits with minimal synergy. He tried not to grimace. The initial bets were small, more a dance of gauging each other's playing style. Round after round passed, each raising the stakes. Sketh exhibited a ruthless edge, frequently pushing Jack to fold uncertain hands. Yet Jack held his nerve, playing conservatively. He managed to win a couple of modest pots, keeping himself afloat. Nyra's presence loomed behind him like a war drum beating in the distance. He could almost feel her frustration each time he folded. But cosmic poker required patience. A single reckless move could cost everything. After several hands, the croupier dealt what would prove to be a pivotal moment. Jack's initial draw was promising, a potential cosmic flush if the right wild cards aligned. He stayed in, matching Sketh's bets, even when the Drakiri confidently raised the stakes. Then came the reveal of the central dealer chip, which indicated the new wild suit, galaxies. Jack already had 2 galaxy cards in his hand. One more turn, and he could complete a flush that would crush almost any other combination. But cosmic poker was infamous for its unpredictability. The next card turned was a comet, not the galaxy Jack needed. Sketh's grin widened. He placed a towering bet, pushing the pot to dizzying heights. Jack's throat went dry. This was the moment to decide whether to chase the flush or fold and live to fight another hand. If he folded now, he'd preserve a decent stack of chips, but he might never get another shot this golden. He glanced at Nyra's reflection in the polished table's edge. She didn't move or speak, but her eyes drilled into him. Steeling himself, Jack met Sketh's gaze. "I call," he said, pushing his chips forward. The croupier turned the final card. It was a galaxy. Jack felt his heart soar, a wild surge of elation surging through him like a comet's tail. He locked down his expression, trying not to reveal the flush dancing in his hand. Sketh's grin faltered, just a fraction of a second, but enough for Jack to sense the Drakiri had not landed what he needed. Nevertheless, Sketh maintained a facade of confidence, placing another bet that matched almost all of Jack's chips. Jack took a deep breath. "All in," he declared, shoving the last of his stack forward. Silence descended like a cloak. Sketh's eyes narrowed, weighing the possibility Jack might be bluffing. Finally, the Drakiri warlord pushed his matching chips forward. The croupier signaled the showdown. Jack flipped his cards, revealing the cosmic flush and galaxies. A murmur of shock rippled around the lounge. Even Nyra sucked in a breath behind him. Sketh slowly revealed his own hand, an impressive four of a kind, but still inferior to a cosmic flush. His lips curled into a snarl, and for an instant, Jack feared violence. The tension was palpable. Then Sketh exhaled a long hiss, leaning back. "I commend you, human," he said in a stiff voice. "It appears the fortune of the stars favors you tonight." Jack's heart thundered, barely believing his luck. He gathered the massive pot, feeling Nyra's gaze burn into his back. He'd won. But the true prize wasn't the chips, it was the location of the Heart of Zenith. Sketh rose with a graceful flourish, studying Jack through narrowed eyes. "I am a Drakiri of my word. You have earned the knowledge of the relic's whereabouts. My sources inform me that a faction of the Drakiri clan keeps it hidden aboard a derelict cruiser in the Takarna belt. They store it in a heavily guarded vault, awaiting a buyer." Nyra's voice crackled with tension. "Tell us how to reach it." Sketh tapped a data chip, sliding it across the table. "Coordinates and passcodes to bypass some of their security. It's not a guarantee, but a courtesy." Jack reached for the chip, but Sketh's hand clenched around it, his eyes flaring with challenge. "Remember this. The Drakiri do not give up such treasures lightly. You may find retrieving the Heart of Zenith to be more perilous than you imagine." Nyra snatched the chip from Sketh's grip, the two exchanging a glare that spoke volumes of their mutual enmity. Satisfied, Sketh offered a mocking bow. "Enjoy your prize, Captain Zarek. And human, if ever you desire another game, I'll be waiting. Perhaps next time, your luck will run out." Jack didn't respond, focusing on keeping his breathing steady. He pocketed the chips, though what good were they if he didn't live long enough to spend them? He felt sweat trickle down his temple, the weight of his victory pressing on him like a cosmic mantle. With the data chip in hand, they left the celestial drift, passing the bouncer with hardly a nod. Relief warred with apprehension in Jack's mind. They had the lead they needed, but at what cost? Once outside, Nyra rounded on him, surprising him with the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "You played well," she said through the drone. "I did not think a human could outwit a Drakiri at cards." Jack gave a shaky laugh, adrenaline still pounding. "Honestly, I'm amazed myself." Her expression grew serious. "We go to the Takarna belt next. Make your preparations. If the Drakiri truly hold the artifact aboard a war-scarred cruiser, we'll need every advantage to seize it. I will request reinforcements from my clan, but they will take time to mobilize. For now, it may be just us." He nodded, swallowing. "All right, let's do it." As they made their way back through the station's winding corridors, Jack felt the intangible bond between himself and the Nexari warrior shift, still fraught with distrust, but tempered by necessity. They had a common goal. If they succeeded, maybe they could go their separate ways with honor intact. Yet, a nagging voice in the back of Jack's mind reminded him that fate had a twisted sense of humor. The more they fought side by side, the more entwined their destinies became. And the more he suspected that the real challenge wasn't winning a card game or surviving the Takarna belt's dangers, but convincing Nyra Zarek that he was more than just an accidental fiancé. Preparations for the journey to the Takarna belt were swift but chaotic. Nyra insisted on visiting an arms dealer she trusted, hidden deep in the station's industrial zone. The dingy workshop echoed with the clang of metal, while overhead lights flickered ominously. There, Jack found himself outfitted with a set of reinforced plating that could be strapped over his clothes, lightweight, but durable enough to absorb a glancing shot. He also procured a plasma pistol with a compact design. His old sidearm, battered and prone to misfires, simply wouldn't cut it. Nyra, meanwhile, examined a fearsome energy halberd that crackled at the edges with a faint blue corona. She gave a sharp nod and strapped it onto her back. Once equipped, they returned to the docking bay where the Rustbucket had been undergoing long overdue repairs. To Jack's surprise, a pair of Nexari mechanics had been working overtime on the ship, courtesy of Elder Zarek's influence. The battered vessel looked slightly less pathetic, its hull patched, thrusters recalibrated, and life support stabilized. He climbed aboard, quickly running through pre-flight checks. The readouts were stable, though still nothing to boast about. Nyra stood behind the pilot's seat, arms folded, scanning the cockpit with a mix of skepticism and reluctant respect. "You're sure this thing can make it to the Takarna belt?" she asked pointedly. Jack forced a confident grin. "She's not pretty, but she's stubborn. Like me." The warrior gave a curt nod, then settled into the co-pilot's seat. Jack engaged the engines, feeling the familiar rumble beneath his boots. The docking clamps released, and the Rustbucket lifted off the pad in a swirl of stationary currents. They launched into the void, leaving Vega Prime behind. In the distance, stars glimmered, and swirling cosmic clouds hinted at the wonders lurking in the endless black. As they charted a course, Jack couldn't help but note the quiet tension permeating the cockpit. "We've got limited intel," he began, eyes flicking between the NAV console and the starfield ahead. A derelict cruiser in the Takarna Belt, controlled by Drakiri raiders. "We have passcodes, but who knows how reliable they are." Nyra's gaze hardened. "The Drakiri could have changed the codes by now, or they might recognize me. We must be prepared for combat." Jack nodded. "What's the plan?" "We fly in stealthily, dock with the cruiser, try to get the Heart of Zenith, and get out before they blow us to space dust." A grim smile tugged at Nyra's lips. "Precisely." As the Rustbucket jumped into faster-than-light travel, the hum of the engine resonated through the ship's cramped corridors. Jack ran a few more diagnostics while Nyra meditated in silence, her eyes closed, hands resting on her knees in some form of Nexari focus ritual. Jack found his thoughts drifting to the trials he had already survived. He was one success away from completing the final test of Nexari worthiness, though what that trial entailed, he still didn't know. Part of him dreaded it. Part of him longed to finish this insane betrothal fiasco, one way or another. He also recalled his precarious gambler's luck, which had served him well at the Celestial Drift, but might not hold in a firefight. Glancing at Nyra, he wondered if she felt any of the same anxieties. Probably not. She was a warrior, bred for conflict. After what felt like an eternity in hyperspace, the ship's scanners beeped an alert. They had arrived at the edge of the Takarna Belt. Jack gasped softly as the swirling vortex of colors outside resolved into a stark view of drifting debris. The Takarna Belt was a region littered with shattered asteroids and countless derelict vessels left from an ancient war. Twisted metal husks and half-collapsed stations floated amid the cosmic rubble, forming a labyrinth of silent wreckage. "Charming," Jack muttered, guiding the Rustbucket carefully into the belt's outskirts. "Which one's our target?" Nyra activated the data chip. A holographic overlay appeared on the cockpit's windshield, indicating a large cruiser drifting near the belt's center. The path to reach it was fraught with gravitational anomalies and pockets of swirling debris. Jack gripped the controls. "Hang on tight. This is going to be tricky." He navigated with painstaking care, weaving around drifting plates of old hull metal and clusters of rock. The ship's proximity alarms blared repeatedly, but he tuned them out, focusing on fine maneuvers that avoided collisions by mere meters. At last, the derelict cruiser came into view. It was a massive structure, once a proud war vessel, now half consumed by rust and cosmic wear. The Drakiri had evidently made it operational enough to house a garrison, judging by the faint energy readings emanating from its midsection. Nyra pointed to a docking port near the starboard side. "That's our entry point." Jack inhaled sharply. "I'll send the passcodes. Let's hope they still work." He keyed in the sequence from the data chip. A tense silence followed. Then, miraculously, the cruiser's docking bay lights flickered, and the metal doors began to part. "Looks like we're still on the list," Jack said. With cautious skill, he guided the Rustbucket inside the derelict's docking bay, setting it down with only a slight jolt. The interior was dimly lit by flickering emergency lamps, casting the battered floor in shadows. Jack killed the engines, turning to Nyra. Her expression was set. She gripped her energy halberd and checked the power cell. Jack did the same with his plasma pistol, tension thrumming through his body. "Ready?" he asked softly. Nyra's eyes gleamed with determination. "Yes, but remain alert. The Drakiri are cunning." Jack forced a shaky grin. "Cunning, sure, but we've got a Nexari warrior and a half-broken human with gambler's luck. We'll manage." The airlock hissed open, unveiling the silent darkness of the cruiser's interior. Together, they stepped out, hearts pounding, into the unknown. Dim corridors stretched before them, lit by sporadic strips of flickering yellow. The deck plating groaned underfoot. A stale, metallic odor hung in the air, hinting at both age and hidden dangers. They moved slowly, scanning each intersection for signs of Drakiri guards. The passcode Sketh Virik had provided proved useful. Several locked bulkheads slid open after Jack entered the sequence into ancient console terminals. At last, they reached a sprawling chamber near the cruiser's core. The walls were lined with containers and crates that bore the Drakiri clan symbol. A large vault door dominated one side, heavily reinforced with mechanical locks and energy shields. Nyra stepped forward, eyes fixed on the vault. This must be it. Jack studied the lock, finding a keypad and a biometric scanner. This wasn't on the data chip. We'll have to improvise. Before they could attempt to crack the security, a sudden shout echoed behind them. Drakiri warriors rushed in, weapons raised. The fierce clack of claws against metal reverberated. Nyra spun, halberd glowing. Jack ducked behind a crate, plasma pistol trembling in his grip. Bolts of green energy sizzled through the air. The first Drakiri lunged at Nyra, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks. She parried with swift skill, her halberd humming as it sliced cleanly through the guard's chest plate, sending him sprawling. Two more advanced, firing pulses of plasma that forced Nyra to dodge. Jack popped up from cover, heart hammering, returning fire. One shot grazed a Drakiri's shoulder, eliciting a hiss of pain. Another shot ricocheted off the metal floor. He cursed under his breath, trying to steady his aim. The firefight escalated, weapons discharging arcs of neon death in the claustrophobic chamber. Sparks flew where stray shots struck overhead conduits, casting the room in showers of luminous debris. Nyra fought with an elegance that took Jack's breath away. Each swing of her halberd was a dance of lethal precision. Bolts of energy whizzed past her, but she moved like liquid fury, never pausing, never wavering. Jack did what he could, keeping the Drakiri pinned whenever they tried to flank Nyra. His heart lurched each time a shot came too close, but adrenaline spurred him to stand his ground. Finally, the last guard dropped, collapsing against a crate with a choked gasp. The chamber fell silent, save for the flickering hiss of damaged wiring. Panting, Jack emerged from cover, shaking from head to toe. He glanced at Nyra, who was breathing heavily but appeared uninjured. Their gazes locked, each acknowledging the other's efforts. Without a word, they turned back to the vault. "We've got to move fast," Jack said, forcing calm into his voice. "Reinforcements will come." Nyra nodded. "Stand back." She gripped her halberd and channeled energy through its blade. A searing arc of blue light slammed into the vault's locking mechanism. Sparks erupted, and metal screeched in protest. The first lock fizzled out, leaving the vault door partially sealed. "Together," Nyra said, beckoning Jack over. They both shoved against the door with all their might. The servo motors, damaged by the halberd strike, stuttered. Slowly, the vault door slid open, revealing a small chamber lined with swirling patterns etched into the walls. A Drakiri attempt at reverent display. At the center rested a pedestal. On it lay a large crystal, pulsating with a soft, mesmerizing glow. The artifact was cracked in several places, as though it had been broken long ago and only recently reassembled. Even so, Jack felt a strange hum in the air, like static electricity dancing across his skin. Nyra approached reverently, her eyes shining with an emotion Jack couldn't name. She reached out, hesitating a moment before lifting the crystal. Its light intensified, reflecting in her feathers. "This is it," she breathed. "The Heart of Zenith." Jack lingered at her side, marveling at the gentle pulse within the crystal. "After all this, we found it." Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the cruiser. A distant chorus of shouted orders and stomping boots reached their ears. Nyra's eyes snapped up. "We have to go now." Cradling the artifact carefully, she led the way back through the corridors they had entered. The alarm's klaxon echoed, setting Jack's nerves on edge. Overhead lights flashed red, signaling the entire cruiser to prepare for lockdown. Their dash to the docking bay was a frantic blur. Doors that once opened with passcodes now refused, forcing Nyra to hack them with her halberd. Drakiri patrols rushed from adjacent corridors, but Nyra and Jack barreled through, exchanging furious blasts of plasma. At last, they reached the docking bay. The Rustbucket loomed in the gloom, ramp extended and engines humming. Jack sprinted up the ramp, yanking the controls to seal the hatch as soon as Nyra dove inside with the relic. Inside the cockpit, he fumbled with the ignition switches. Come on," he muttered. "Don't fail me now." A shudder ran through the ship as the battered thrusters roared to life. The docking bay doors began closing, an automated lockdown procedure triggered by the alarm. With no time to spare, Jack punched the throttle. The Rustbucket lurched forward, scraping the half-lowered doors in a shower of sparks before bursting into the vacuum of space. Jack wrestled the controls, navigating the debris field with white-knuckled determination. Behind them, the cruiser's turrets lit up, spewing plasma bolts into the swirling belt. One bolt clipped the Rustbucket's aft, sending the ship spinning. Alarms wailed in the cockpit, red lights flashing. But Jack coaxed the battered vessel back under control, gritting his teeth through the turbulence. Nyra strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, cradling the Heart of Zenith protectively. Another volley of fire streaked past, rocking them again. "Divert power to shields," she shouted. Jack complied, rerouting power from life support, momentarily trusting the emergency oxygen reserves. The shields flickered, absorbing a few more hits. With a final surge of speed, they cleared the range of the cruiser's guns and sailed into open space. Only then did Jack exhale a tremulous breath, letting his heartbeat slow. Nyra pressed a hand to her chest, eyes drifting to the crystal that now glowed in her lap. "We did it," she whispered. "The Heart of Zenith is ours again." Jack locked in a course back to Vega Prime. He met Nyra's gaze, and for a brief moment, something warm passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared triumph, of survival against the odds. But beneath that flicker of camaraderie, Jack sensed an undercurrent he wasn't ready to name. Their destinies had collided in the strangest way, forging a bond in battle. Whether that bond would lead to the end of the betrothal or something far more profound remained uncertain. For now, they had won a significant victory. The Heart of Zenith was safe, and the Drakiri had been thwarted. But in Jack's experience, a single victory often paved the way for unexpected twists. He could only hope that whatever came next, it would not plunge them into a deeper cosmic storm. Word of their success spread quickly throughout Vega Prime. As soon as the Rustbucket docked, Nexari warriors arrived to secure the Heart of Zenith, greeting Nyra with reverent salutes. Elder Zarek herself appeared, leaning on her staff, her eyes reflecting a profound relief as she gently lifted the crystal. Jack watched from a short distance, arms crossed, feeling equal parts exhausted and exhilarated. He had risked everything to recover that artifact, forging a tenuous partnership with Nyra that teetered between respect and hostility. Perhaps now he could bow out gracefully from the betrothal, fulfilling his accidental vow without continuing down a path that led to an unwanted marriage. When Elder Zarek approached him, the translator drone delivered her warm thanks. "You have done a great service for our people, Jack Solis. The Heart of Zenith shall be restored, and our clan's future protected." Jack inclined his head, trying to hide his nerves. "I'm glad I could help. So, does that mean I'm free to go?" The matriarch's eyes twinkled, but she gave no direct answer. Instead, she gestured for the Nexari to step aside, creating a wide circle in the docking bay. Nyra stood at the center, her face unreadable. Curiosity pricked at Jack. Then Elder Zarek spoke, the drone translating. "The time has come for your final trial." A hush descended. Jack's mind raced. He had survived the gauntlet of the twin swords and the test of shadows. Did the mission to retrieve the Heart of Zenith not count as his third trial? Elder Zarek seemed to read his confusion. She clarified, "Retrieving the Heart of Zenith was a mission of dire need, not your personal trial. Your final test is the challenge of the soul. If you pass, you shall be deemed worthy of union with Captain Nyra. If you fail, you forfeit the betrothal." Jack's stomach churned. This was it, the moment that would free him or bind him forever. He took a steadying breath, nodding. "I'm ready." Elder Zarek raised her staff, and the drone announced, "The challenge of the soul is a test of one's innermost intentions. You must face Captain Nyra in symbolic combat, not to the death, but to yield. Only by revealing your true spirit in the fight will we know if you are worthy of her." A ripple of anticipation spread through the Nexari onlookers. Nyra stepped forward, brandishing her halberd with a flourish that made Jack's pulse spike. She looked every inch the formidable warrior, her golden-feathered crest shimmering in the station's overhead lights. Jack swallowed. He had no illusions about his combat prowess compared to hers. But maybe the trial wasn't about raw skill. It was about heart and honesty. He borrowed a training sword from one of the Nexari, its dull edges meant for practice, though still capable of bruising or breaking bones if used carelessly. The circle of warriors closed around them, forming a living arena. Nyra stood poised, halberd at the ready, her expression carefully neutral. Jack took his place opposite her, nerves fluttering in his gut like caged birds. Elder Zarek gave a solemn nod to commence. Without warning, Nyra lunged. Jack barely parried, his training sword shuddering under the impact. She followed with a swift kick that sent him stumbling backward. The circle of watchers remained silent, observing intently. Jack steadied himself, heart pounding. He reminded himself that the trial was about revealing character. If he fought with cunning and respect, perhaps that would suffice. He circled Nyra, feinting low. She anticipated his move, batting aside his sword with ease. The force jarred his arm, pain radiating up to his shoulder. He clenched his teeth, refusing to yield just yet. Blow after blow, Nyra outmaneuvered him, her halberd's reach making it nearly impossible for him to close in. Yet he refused to give up. Each time, he tried something new, dodging, sidestepping, or abruptly reversing direction to catch her off guard. At times, he managed to land a glancing strike, but never enough to truly unbalance her. She was a master at this, while he was improvising from bar-brawl instincts and half-remembered self-defense drills. The watchers breathed softly, a near-silent wave of reaction passing through them whenever Jack stumbled or Nyra unleashed a powerful swing. Minutes stretched. Sweat poured down his face. His lungs burned. Nyra unleashed a sudden, powerful thrust. Jack attempted to parry, but her halberd knocked him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. His sword clattered away. Gasping, he looked up to see her looming over him, halberd tip pointed at his throat. For a long moment, time seemed to freeze. The onlookers held their breath. Jack's mind whirled. He could try to scramble for his sword, but she'd knock him senseless before he could even grip it. All that was left was a choice, to yield or to defy. He swallowed, meeting her gaze. "I won't beg," he whispered, voice trembling only slightly. "If I'm unworthy, so be it. But I never came here to lie or cheat. I only tried to help, and I'm not ashamed of that." His words hung in the charged air. Nyra's eyes flickered, an unreadable emotion passing across them. She slowly lowered the halberd. Then, to Jack's shock, she extended her free hand. He hesitated, then gripped her arm, allowing her to haul him to his feet. The circle of Nexari murmured in collective surprise, for it was clear that Nyra had chosen not to force him to yield. Elder Zarek stepped forward, staff tapping on the deck plating. She studied Nyra, then Jack, her gaze solemn. "You stand by your convictions, even in the face of certain defeat," she observed through the drone. "Captain Nyra, do you deem him worthy?" Nyra looked at Jack, her expression a mixture of lingering frustration and reluctant admiration. She answered quietly, the drone translating. "He fights without skill, yet he does not waver in purpose. He has aided our clan beyond measure, and he respects our ways, even if they are foreign to him." The matriarch nodded. "So be it. By the laws of our people, the final trial is fulfilled. Jack Solis has proven his integrity. Thus, he is deemed worthy." Jack's heart lurched. He glanced from Nyra to Elder Zarek, uncertain how to respond. He had passed. He was worthy of an engagement to a warrior who had viewed him with contempt. Elder Zarek raised her staff once more, proclaiming in a voice filled with ceremony, "Let the bond stand recognized. Unless you both desire otherwise, the arrangement shall proceed." Silence descended. The clan waited. Jack's throat constricted, uncertain what Nyra would say. Nyra lowered her gaze, exhaling. Then she looked at Jack. "I cannot deny your courage or your sincerity," she said, softly but with clear meaning. "But let me be direct. We were forced upon each other by an ancient custom. If you wish to sever this bond, I will not stand in your way. I have seen enough of your heart to know you are not dishonorable." He stared, her words a small shock. She was giving him a graceful exit, despite everything. Part of him longed to accept, to escape this labyrinth of alien customs and near-death experiences, to retreat to his old dreams of a quiet orchard on Mars. Yet another part of him recalled every moment they had fought side by side, the synergy they had discovered, and the raw respect that now flowed between them. Perhaps the trials were not just about satisfying tradition. They had forged a partnership he never expected. He glanced at Elder Zarek, who watched him with a warm, knowing smile, as though she sensed his turmoil. Finally, Jack spoke, his voice trembling. Captain Nyra, I don't fully understand your ways, but I respect them. And I respect you. I won't force you to do anything you don't want. But maybe we could see where this goes? Not as forced spouses, but as partners. A ripple of astonishment passed through the watching Nexari. Nyra's eyes widened briefly. Then she gave a single, decisive nod. As partners, then, in battle and in life, let it be by our shared will, not by the shackles of custom. Elder Zarek's face lit with pride. She tapped her staff, signaling the clan to disperse. Some left, while others bowed to Jack in acknowledgement. The translator drone crackled. Thus is the union pledged, not by compulsion, but by mutual choice. Jack exhaled a shaky laugh. He felt as though he had crossed a threshold into a new reality, one where an alien warrior's fierce devotion and his own haphazard courage could somehow intertwine. Nyra stepped closer, lowering her voice. We have reclaimed the Heart of Zenith. Our clan is safe. For now, we both remain tied to the stars, to battles yet to come. Will you stay by my side? He met her gaze, a small smile tugging at his lips. I've come this far. I figure I might as well stick around. They stood there, side by side, the battered docking bay of Vega prime a silent testament to the trials overcome. And though neither fully comprehended what fate would bring, they both sensed that whatever adventure came next, they would face it together. Over the following weeks, the Nexari clan celebrated the return of the Heart of Zenith with quiet reverence rather than ostentatious fanfare. Word of their success spread across the station, earning Captain Nyra and Jack a measure of respect, even among certain Drakiri who begrudgingly acknowledged their victory. Jack never imagined himself at the heart of a Nexari ceremonial banquet, yet here he was, seated beside Nyra in a great hall reserved for clan gatherings. Feasting on richly spiced delicacies, listening to the rhythmic drumming of Nexari instruments, he found the cultural tapestry both alien and strangely comforting. Elder Zarek occupied a place of honor near them, occasionally leaning over to share a wise remark. The matriarch had all but adopted Jack into the clan, though she made no demands for official vows or rituals. To her, it was enough that he and Nyra had chosen to stand as partners by their own volition. In quieter moments, Jack found himself wandering the corridors of the station with Nyra, discussing the future in tentative tones. She spoke of her next missions, protecting Nexari interests, forging alliances, and perhaps even helping to negotiate peaceful resolutions with certain Drakiri factions. Jack, for his part, admitted that the lure of courier work had faded. He had glimpsed something grander: responsibility, loyalty, and a cause bigger than himself. When talk turned to the betrothal, they approached it with careful honesty. Neither was in a rush to define or label what they had, other than a sense of mutual respect and budding affection. Nyra confessed that she had never anticipated finding a partner in someone so unlike her, and yet, the cosmos had a way of weaving destinies together in unexpected patterns. Meanwhile, Jack oversaw the final repairs to the Rustbucket. With a portion of his newfound gambling winnings, plus some generous Nexari funds, he refitted the old vessel until she gleamed with renewed life. The engine no longer sputtered, and the cockpit's flickering panels had been replaced. He could have renamed the ship something more dignified, but decided to keep Rustbucket as a reminder of how far he'd come. On the evening before they were set to depart for a new journey, this time, by choice, not by necessity, Jack stood on one of Vega Prime's observation decks, gazing at the shimmering planet below. He heard a faint swish of fabric behind him. Nyra stepped forward, resting a hand on the railing beside his. She looked out at the same vista, the glow of distant stars reflected in her golden crest. Tomorrow, we leave for the Nexari homeworld, she said quietly. We'll present the Heart of Zenith to the broader council. They'll want to meet you. Jack felt a ripple of nerves. And if they disapprove? Nyra's lips curled wryly. They can disapprove all they like. Tradition has been satisfied. Our clan stands by us. The rest must learn to adapt. He smiled at the note of defiance in her voice, but also at the growing warmth in her eyes as she glanced his way. Tentatively, he reached out, and she allowed him to take her hand, her strong fingers interlocking with his. In that quiet moment, the swirling demands of the galaxy seemed to recede, leaving only the two of them perched on the edge of infinity. The hum of the station's life support droned in the distance, punctuated by the faint whir of passing ships. Jack exhaled. You know, if someone told me a month ago I'd be standing here, engaged to a Nexari warrior, I would have laughed them out of the room. Nyra arched a brow. Is that regret I hear? He shook his head slowly, a genuine smile blossoming. Not regret, more like astonishment, and maybe gratitude. The trials, the artifact, this betrothal, it all changed me. She studied his face as though searching for any hint of falsehood, then seemed satisfied. It changed me, too. Whether we become formal mates or simply remain comrades in arms, the path is ours to decide. He squeezed her hand gently, heart brimming with an unexpected sense of belonging. Then let's decide it together, out there among the stars. Nyra nodded, a certain lightness entering her expression. They stood in companionable silence, observing the cosmic panorama that had brought them together in such a wild, unpredictable dance. The next day, with the Heart of Zenith secured in a protective case, they boarded the Rustbucket for a journey not born of desperation, but of promise. Elder Zarek offered them both a final blessing, gently placing a hand on each of their shoulders and murmuring words of ancient Nexari benediction. As the Rustbucket soared away from Vega Prime, Jack and Nyra shared the cockpit, their seats side by side. The hum of the engine no longer coughed in protest, but purred with renewed vigor. Charting a course for the Nexari homeworld, they both felt an undercurrent of exhilaration run through them. For Jack Solis, once a lone courier scraping by, the galaxy had expanded into a realm of endless possibility and endless heart. For Nyra Zarek, once duty-bound to her clan with little room for personal choice, the future now held a partner who stood by her of his own free will. Their adventures were far from over. Rival clans and lurking foes still plotted in the shadows. Cosmic anomalies still beckoned with hidden perils, and the complexities of forging deeper connections lay before them like an unexplored starfield. But they would face each obstacle together, forging a new destiny along the way. They cast one last look at Vega Prime as it receded, its bright spires disappearing amid the vast tapestry of stars. Then, hand in hand on the controls, they propelled themselves into the cosmic sea, hearts aligned in a harmony that transcended both cultural divides and the star-dappled void. And so, their story did not end with a wedding march or a final goodbye, but with a beginning. Two wandering souls venturing forth, bound by shared purpose and a growing love, ready to carve out a future as radiant and boundless as the galaxy itself.